This week on From the Vault, it's a double shot of Hulkamania as Ricky Rock's retro action figure review takes a look at Jakks Classic Superstars 1985 Hulk Hogan. Jack, check it out. Welcome back to From the Vault, Ricky Rock's retro action figure review. It's a double shot of Hulkamania as we're doing another episode focused on the greatest wrestler in the history of the entire universe. Just ask him, Hulk Hogan, the immortal one himself. We're looking at a completely different line, and this one fits a little bit more within the parameters of a retro action figure review in that it came out more than 10 years ago. So, to me, that's fair to call it a retro action figure by that point. We're looking at Jakks Classic Superstars Hulk Hogan. This was a limited edition that came out, I think, in Canada and maybe a few other places. It wasn't easy to find. I got this at, stop me if you've heard this one, Funkenstein Wrestling Superstore. Englishtown Flea Market, Englishtown, New Jersey. They've got all the wrestling figures you could ever hope to find from every era going back to the LJNs and the Remcos of the 1980s all the way up to the Jackson Mattels of today. I can't say enough good things about the place. They've got everything I want. It's just that simple. That's where I got this. I got this a couple weeks ago and I've been holding on to it for just this occasion. I was inspired. And as you saw before in our last review episode, I'm a passionate Hulk Hogan fan since the beginning. He's the one who got me into professional wrestling in the first place. The very first memory I have of watching television, I would have been about 2 years old, was Hulk Hogan wrestling the Iron Sheik in a steel cage match. And immediately I was hooked on pro wrestling, and I was immediately the world's biggest Hulk Hogan fan. I have almost 50 different Hulk Hogan figures, maybe 50. I haven't done a full count. I picked up a few figures recently, and I don't have a full list of everything just yet, but I've definitely got a lot of them. And this is one of the newest ones I've picked up. This is a very special version of Hulk Hogan, because it's not one that you see very often. When people tend to think of Hulk Hogan, there's a couple different looks that spring to mind. Either the classic red and yellow, like we looked at in our last review, or maybe the black and white Hollywood Hogan of the late 90s. But it's usually one or the other. But if you're a fan from way, way back, you'll remember that he didn't really stick with just red and yellow until around 1987. He used to wear a lot of different things. It was still mostly red and yellow. But he would occasionally wear blue and white, he would wear all white, he would wear white and red. He mixed it up quite a bit for a while. If you looked at the old Coliseum videotapes back in the 80s and 90s and their Hulkamania collections, you'd see him look like this a lot. That's where I saw it for the first time, and it was kind of cool because I'd only ever seen him in the classic red and yellow, which is still my favorite, but since it was different, whenever I'd see one of those older Hogan matches with him wearing the blue or the white, it felt special in a sense, because it wasn't an everyday thing. I really liked it, and I miss it. I run into people all the time who say that this was their favorite Hulk Hogan look, and you know what? I don't have a problem with that. It's not my favorite, but it's definitely one that I always took notice of and appreciated and enjoyed. Again, just like I said about the Mattel figures in our last review, based on things like the head sculpt and the attire and the accessories, you can tell right away that this is a very specific version of Hulk Hogan. This would have been late 1984 to very early 1985 because of the headband, the hairline, and the title belt. If you get a close look at that title belt there, you'll see that that's the way the belt looked up until 1985, where they switched it out for the gold version that he wore during the Orndorff feud and otherwise. So this was the second version of the belt Hogan wore after the big round green looking thing that he beat the Sheiky for. So it's a really good looking version of the belt, except for it was during the era which was most of the time with Jakks, little nitpicks about their otherwise awesome title belts. they cheap out on not painting the lettering and the plates. So you just get this big silver blob of title belt. It does say, world champion on it. It's kind of difficult to see unless you look at it real super close, and we will when we take it out of the package. Yeah, we're going to take it out of the package. That's what I do. You don't like it? You know where to go. But so again, this is a really great representation of how Hulk Hogan looked at that specific moment in his career, and it's fantastic. I have always loved this Classic Superstars packaging. Okay, I love this line. This is one of my favorite action figure lines of all time. I love the black and gold. It gives it a really majestic Hall of Fame kind of feeling. It makes every single wrestler in the line feel important and special, whether it's Hulk Hogan or Chief Jay Strongbow or Andy Kaufman. Every one of the Classic Superstars figures, when you walk into a store or a flea market and you see one of these fucking things hanging on a shelf, it doesn't matter if it's Hulk Hogan or Sensational Sherry. It screams, "Buy me, motherfucker." This fucker is an important part of wrestling history. That's what I get when I look at one of these fucking action figures in the package. And that's a shoot, brother. And this one's no different. I love it. I mean, it doesn't even matter that this was a limited release exclusive figure. That just puts it over even more. But every single Jakks Classic Superstars figure felt like a big deal. And I love that. On the back, you can tell this was a limited edition because it doesn't have a whole wave of figures. There's only two. Both of these, 85 Hogan and 2003 Hogan, were a limited release that came out in, I think, Canada and a few other places around 2006. You can find them, and you can find them for reasonable prices, but reasonable being, you might get lucky and see it for 50, you might not be lucky, see it for 100. I paid somewhere in between that for this guy. I don't regret it at all. This is a figure that any Hogan fan needs to have in their collection. Mattel did a version similar to this. I don't have it yet. Otherwise, I would do like a comparison review. So when I do get that figure, that's probably what I'll do. I'll put them side by side and we'll point out the little differences, because there are. The little ways that each figure is better. But today we're going to talk about this one. We're going to take it out of the package and I'm going to go over every detail of it. But right out of the bat, it's 10 out of 10. I love it. So if that's what you're looking for, that's what you need to know. I love this figure, but we're going to talk about why. So stick around, and I'm going to break your heart by getting this guy out of the plastic, and we're going to talk about it. Well, here it is, brother. Jakks Classic Superstars Limited Edition Hulk Hogan 1985. Could be late 84, but I'm just saying 1985. Action figure with the blue and white outfit and the classic silver WWF Championship belt. This is a near perfect Hulk Hogan. There are a few minor nitpicks I have with it that I'll talk about, but again, right out of the box, absolutely great figure. Speaking of the box, what I love among many things about the Classic Superstars is if you're careful, you can get these things out of the package really easily, and they still hold up if you want to put them back in later, if you just want to display them. As long as you don't rip the damn thing to pieces, it holds up. I love the big giant window. You still have the name and the photo to tell you who it is, but for the most part, they let the figure speak for itself by taking up most of the real estate on the package, and I've always loved that about the Classic Superstars series. So, you got the Hulkster here, and just like we talked about with the Mattel Hulk Hogan's, each head that they used was unique to a very specific era of Hulk Hogan's career, and Jakks was doing the same thing first, so credit to them where it's due. People will argue forever about which one did a better job. It's funny because I think that Jakks figures were a little bit more spot on in terms of being photorealistic. I mean, this pretty much looks exactly like Hulk Hogan looked at a certain point in 1984-85. If you look at a photo from the internet, it's creepy how close that comes. I mean, I think Jakks was a little bit more accurate in terms of photorealism when it came to their wrestler faces, but I think Mattel even though they might not be photo perfect, sort of capture the spirit of the individual wrestler a little bit better sometimes, if that makes sense. If not, fuck you, I'm just going off the brain here. So, right away, just like the Mattels, you can tell by the mustache, the facial expression, the hairline, and of course the headband, the white Hulkster headband written in script that he only wore for that first year that he was world champion. That gives away that this is a very specific time in his career. The head is reused from another Hogan figure, and that's something Jakks did a lot that people have a problem with. They reused parts for everything, and a lot of stuff was just repainted or borrowed from other stuff, and it wasn't always consistent. Like, they did like a bunch of different Hogans, and each of them has a different body as well as head. Some of them are taller, shorter, more ripped, less ripped, so there wasn't a lot of consistency there. They've always been kind of cheap about that, ever since the beginning. Some people have a huge problem with the Jakks figures because of that, whereas Mattel, they're a little bit more unique and accurate to each character. Jakks was always about kind of saving money by reusing parts, be it heads, bodies, whatever. I never had a problem with that, because I'm a little bit more pragmatic than some people, and I understand that everything costs money. These figures were already like $25 a pop when they came out, 20 to 25, brand new in the stores. You go to Toys R Us, that's what you pay, 20 bucks. And this would have been even more because it's an exclusive figure that they didn't make a lot of. So this thing probably came out for about $50 when it was brand new. So to keep things kind of cost effective, they'd reuse a head, a body from a different figure, and they would just kind of borrow and repaint and whatever. To me, I look at it as that's one thing they had to compromise on in the big picture to be able to give us 7 million different wrestlers in the Classic Superstars series, from Hulk Hogan to fucking Zeus. They couldn't have given us so many different characters without borrowing and swapping, and that's just the way it is. So I'm okay with it. I think it's fine. I just go for, did they capture the spirit of the wrestler? Yes or no? And in this case, it's obviously yes. A few minor imperfections we'll talk about real quick. I do love the blue and white. Like I said, it's a great look for Hogan. He didn't do it a lot, but it was memorable. The blue isn't quite accurate to what I remember. It's more like his Player 2 character in the NES WrestleMania game. It's more of a royal blue. When he wrestled, it was more of a baby blue. I'm not too concerned about it. Again, it's the spirit, and it's close. Mattel's was a little bit more accurate with their color when they did a version of this figure, and that's great too. I don't have it yet, but I want it. This guy, it still looks great, and he did wear this color sometimes, so it's not like it's totally inaccurate. The belt, again, almost perfect. Great representation of the 85 belt. But like I said, Jakks, they didn't always paint the plates or the letters, and it just kind of makes the belt look a little bland. They got better at it right at the end, right before they lost the license or stopped renewing it, whatever happened there before Mattel took it over. The last year or two, Jakks got really good and their belts were fantastic. But here, they were still really good, but they hadn't nailed it yet like they did at the end. But this is a belt that they didn't use on a lot of figures, so it's a great one to have. So if you're a completionist, you gotta get it. You know, because I really like all the different, I'm a belt mark. I love all the different kinds of belts. So every time they do a version that's specific, like this was the belt he had in 85, this was the 86 one, this was the one he had after he fought Andre. I like having all the different belts because they fit every different Hogan figure. So that's an important thing to have. One thing that bothers me about a lot of Hogan figures, and again, I think it's partly a cost-saving measure, a production thing, he's always too pale. He's always too pale. I didn't really mention that in the Mattel figure reviews because it was already getting kind of long. But even as great as those are, they're kind of the same color as all the other WWE figures. Hulk Hogan is brown as hell. Hulk Hogan is basically the human equivalent of bacon. And no wrestling figure has ever completely captured that accurately. It's a minor nitpick, but come on. You know, you get everything else perfect, and then you have this pale kind of, it's regular flesh color. It's darker than I am, but it's still not as dark as Hulk Hogan is. So again, minor nitpick. It's probably, they only use one brand of paint at the factory, but every Hulk Hogan figure I see, I want to repaint, because it's just not brown enough. I mean, you know, we might show you a photo just so you get the idea. But you look at this, and then you look at Hulk Hogan, and that's one thing they could have done better. But moving on from that. Other than that, the only thing I would want to be different was the fact that it didn't come with a white American-made t-shirt, because that's what he always wore with this look. They did another Hogan limited edition figure that had long red tights. It was even more exclusive. It was like an outfit he wore on an episode of TNT back in '85 or so. He had red tights, and it comes with a white cloth American-made t-shirt. So, I mean, you could always get that shirt and put it on this figure, because it would look even better. That's the only thing I would really wish. I'm not going to take points off for it, because you can find the shirt. There's websites that make reproductions of that shirt and every shirt. Like, I think Ralph's Figure Clothing, they do every shirt. Hogan, they do Macho Man, they, you know, you can find this stuff. So even though I wish it came in the package with every figure, I really try not to take points off for it, because, you know, if you go somewhere else and spend like $5, you can find it. So I wish it came with the figure, but the figure without it is still great. So, aside from that, you got your standard Jakks articulation here, which is a fair amount. Not anywhere near as much as the Mattel figures, but you can still do a lot of the poses that you would want to do with them. Again, most Jakks Ruthless Aggression figures were made like this. They started doing these around 2003, and for the longest time, they were the best wrestling figures ever made. They had the perfect match of articulation and likeness. Jakks figures were terrible when they started. I'm just going to say it. From 96 to 2001 or so, Jakks figures were fucking terrible. But as every bit as shitty as they were in the beginning, in my opinion, feel free to fight me on it, but if you really love those bone-crunching action figures for anything more than novelty or nostalgia, I understand liking them. I have a couple, they're fine, but, I mean, they weren't good. They were just the best we had. And it got so much better, as this fucking thing proves. Because they weren't doing faces that looked this good. They didn't have articulation at all, let alone you'd be able to do the swivel bicep and, you know, the Hogan pose and the crab pose and all the stuff that he does. You know, the 96 to 2001 Jakks figures didn't move except for, like, the arms and the legs. So here, you do have knee joints. The legs go forward and back to a reasonable degree. It's nowhere near as flexible in the hips as a Mattel figure, but they hadn't gotten that far yet. That shit only became standard like 2009, and this was around 2006. For 2006, this was the best you could get in wrestling figures. TNA was still being done by Toy Biz at the time, and their figures were great too, as was Toy Biz's WCW line, which I'm going to talk about in another video eventually. But, you know, in 2006, the Jakks WWE Ruthless Aggression figures were as good as it got, and this is definitely one of the best ones. I said before, eventually I'm going to do an entire video on my whole Hulk Hogan collection, because I got about 50 figures. I got rare stuff, common stuff, and a little bit of everything. And we're going to talk about it.
The one time I tangled with a Jew, my ex-wife got half my shit.
It's going to be an epic video. This one, there's pretty much not much else to say. Minor nitpicks aside, looking just at this figure and what it comes with and how it looks and everything about it, I gotta give it a 10 out of 10. I would like for it to move a little bit less stiffly and have a few more moving parts, but that's minor. They weren't there yet, and I accepted it then, I accept it now. He looks great on the shelf with all your WWF action figures, especially if you have like a little spot for vintage old school guys. Like, sometimes you separate it by eras. I like to do that sometimes. So, you know, he looks great next to your other 1980s Hogans. really, just for the comparison's sake, we're going to bring in Mattel basic 1986 Hulk Hogan. So again, this would have been 2 years apart roughly in his career. This would have been like late 84, this would have been late 86. So as you can see, like I said, they're both pretty much perfect in their own way. They're different, but they're great. This one moves a little bit better, as we saw in the last video. This title belt came with a Jakks Deluxe Superstars Hulk Hogan. I'm borrowing it because it looks fantastic on this figure, and this figure didn't come with a belt, so I'm borrowing just for the sake of the look. But again, how could you go wrong either way? And in each case, they totally nailed the likeness, the expression, and just all the little things that really capture Hulk Hogan. There's been a million Hulk Hogan figures. Some of them are better than others, but, you know, for what Mattel does, this was a 10 out of 10. And for what Jakks always did, this is a 10 out of 10. You know, everybody's got their personal preference, but I say if you got the money, get whatever you can. If you're a Hulk Hogan fan, you can't go wrong. This was a special figure for me to find. I was looking for it for a while, and thanks to a couple of pals, I was able to get it at a reasonable price. If you look around, you can find it. It was a limited edition, but it's not impossible to find. It's just a matter of what you're looking to spend. But it's definitely worth the investment if you're a collector and a fan. I say check it out, and that's just about going to do it. So we're going to wrap it up here on From the Vault. And thanks for sticking with us. This has been a look at the Classic Superstars Limited Edition 1984-85 Hulk Hogan. Next time, we're going to mix it up a little bit. I haven't fully decided what we're going to do yet because I'm kind of winging it. These two just came out of nowhere because I was having a really good day. But thanks for watching. Hope you'll stick around for the next one. We're going to try and make it a little bit different because we're not going to just do wrestling stuff, just like we're not going to just do superhero stuff, but we're going to do a little bit of that and everything. So thanks for sticking with us. We're going to wrap it up here on From the Vault, Ricky Rock's Retro Action Figure Review, Hulk Hogan 84-85 Classic Superstars. We're going to see you next time.